Welcome to Raving Ryan. I have a very special guest here today. Former Congressman from Florida's 1st District and current co-host of MSMBC's Morning Joe, Joe Scarborough. Mr. Scarborough, how are you?
Great to meet you, Ryan. Thank you so
you.
much for interviewing me.
So I want to start with some questions about the show.
Mm-hmm.
We see that I'm a huge fan of the show and our viewers also, but can you tell us how the show came about and how it started?
Well, the person that preceded me was a guy named Don Imus, made some inflammatory comments about women's basketball, and was taken off the air. And so they had several people try out, and nobody quite got it. And so I kept begging to let me try to do the morning show because I had a show at night, but I really felt like the morning would be best. And everybody thought I was crazy for wanting to wake up at 4 a.m. and do a morning show. But finally, Memorial Day weekend 2007, nobody else wanted to do the show, so they gave me a shot. And after the first day, I think most everybody figured that Mika and I would make the best hosts.
And I know there's lots of opinions going around the show. It's not just like hard news like what you watch at night. Can you tell me why you think opinion news is better for the show?
Well, I think it's important to have the news and then instead of just having people on one side or the other debating, actually analyze what's going on and try to explain to people what's going on. That's really what our goal is, more than just giving our opinion on this or giving our opinion on that. It's to explain to people what's happening behind the scenes. It would be the equivalent of somebody watching a football game and explaining what's going on the field and why it's going on the field the way it is, and trying to predict what's going to happen next. Mika and I caught a lot of flack early on this year because we kept predicting that Donald Trump was going to be the Republican nominee. Nobody else thought he was, and when they were critical of us, I said, well, I'm just like a football analyst, and I'm looking at what's happening on the football field, and it seems pretty predictable to me what's going to happen, and that's when we predicted Trump would win the nomination. Now, a lot of Trump supporters are attacking us because we're looking at the way he's running this general election campaign, and we think it looks like he's going to lose.
And a lot of our viewers are wondering how many people work behind the scenes in the show.
Oh my gosh. It started out at 3, and we're probably up to 75 by now.
And I've watched all 3 of the morning cable news shows on CNN and Fox News and you guys. Can you tell me what you think makes Morning Joe different than the others?
Well, we have always had this attitude that when we went on TV, we were not going to play by the rules. In fact, when some guests come on, they'll be really nervous and they'll say, what do we do? What do we do? And we say, don't play TV. Just talk. Just have a regular conversation. Don't look at the cameras. And they say, where are we supposed to look? And say, look at us, and we'll just talk. And so you look at almost every other news show, and they're all reading the teleprompter. They're all looking at each other. They're all, like doing scripts, and every segment is heavily produced. And we're not just that way. I remember the first time Bob Woodward, who of course is a legendary reporter, came on the show. He walked in to the room with me in the studio and said, what are we talking about today? I said, what do you want to talk about today? He said, Afghanistan, Kandahar. I go, okay. And so we finished the interview, talked about Afghanistan and for about 15 minutes. And when we were finished, he said, this show is like no other show. Every other show, they call you the night before. They say, these are the 4 questions we're going to ask you. The segment's going to be 3 minutes, and then we'll thank you, and that's it. And with us, nothing's planned out. We go out there, we read the newspapers that morning, and we go in our own direction. And I think that's what has separated us from everybody else for 9 years.
And I want to move into some questions about your career as a congressman. While you were in Congress, there was a Republican-controlled Congress with a Democratic president. Can you tell me what your relationship was with Bill Clinton?
You mean other than when I was impeaching him? It's very interesting about Bill Clinton. We fought each other a good bit, and at times didn't have a good relationship, but we also got a lot of things done. The Republican Congress and Bill Clinton. You had a Republican Congress that didn't like Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton didn't like the Republican Congress. But we still, even while we were fighting politically, worked together. We balanced the budget together for the first time in a generation. We balanced it 4 years in a row for the first time since the 1920s. We passed welfare reform. We saved Medicare, extended its life for 7 years. We cut taxes. We cut regulations. Paid down the national debt. So we did a lot of great things together. And the reason why, Bill Clinton and I were talking about it a couple of years ago, the reason why was because, as Bill Clinton said, when you're president of the United States, or even a governor, the best asset you can ever have is a short memory. He said, I just didn't take things personally. He goes, you didn't take things personally. It was just politics. And there's always another fight to have. There's always another vote to have. And so you have to put the past behind you. And he was very good and capable of doing that.
And while you were in Congress, Congress's approval rating was around 40%. Mm-hmm. Now it's gone down to 10%. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me why you think the American people have lost this trust in Congress?
Well, I think because we got things done. And it was pretty rough at times, but we got things done. We passed a contract with America. We passed rules that made sure that the same laws that the rest of America abided by, Congress had to abide by, passed one reform after another, and we're constantly passing legislation. And the debates were tough, but we got things done. That's just not happening in Washington, D.C. anymore. It's all about politics. It's all about fighting. It's all about putting your party first. And I think that's in part why Congress has such a low approval rating, and why the two nominees for the party, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, also have very low approval ratings, record low approval ratings.
Yeah, and I want to move into some questions about some Connecticut politics. I know you live there, and I do also. Earlier this year, General Electric announced to be leaving the state. This is a huge loss for Connecticut and the residents of Connecticut. Can you tell me your opinion of the situation, and if you think the lawmakers are doing a good job in Connecticut?
No, the lawmakers are not doing a good job in Connecticut. The governor's not doing a good job in Connecticut. And, when I talked to Jeff Immelt, who's the CEO of General Electric, and was begging him, hey, give us another chance. Maybe there will be some like-minded legislators elected in 2016. He said, Joe, the problem wasn't so much the tax increases. The problem was that we didn't feel like we had a partner in Hartford. He said they were constantly fighting us. I was constantly begging them for over a decade to create an IT corridor between Hartford and New Haven, to use what we had with the UConn education system and use what we had with Yale and some of the best schools on the planet to build a Silicon Valley East. And he said nobody was ever interested in that. They were interested in old-time politics. And so he said, he told me, he said, hey, we're going up to Massachusetts. They have high taxes, but at least we feel like we have a partner that wants to grow with us there. So there has to be a change of attitude up in Hartford. And unfortunately, I just don't see that happening right now.
And would you ever consider running for a governor or senator maybe in 2018?
I've had a lot of people ask me about 2018. Right now, I think I'm working at NBC through 2018. Yeah. But right now, for me, the most important thing to figure out is whether Hartford can be fixed, whether Hartford wants to be fixed, and whether voters are disgusted enough with what they've seen since 1991. With taxes going up, with spending caps constantly being busted, with jobs moving out of state. I mean, everybody talks about General Electric leaving. There's so many small business owners that are feeling the squeeze right now. You look at a poll, 50% of people in Connecticut say that they'd love to leave Connecticut if they could. I kind of feel like, I'm an animal on the ark, running off the ark when everybody else is running onto the ark, because I love Connecticut. Yeah. And I've said I'm going to stay in Connecticut no matter what, because my kids love this state. And I think it's a state worth fighting for. There are a lot of great things in Connecticut. I mean, we've got a great quality of life. We've got some of the best healthcare systems in the nation. We've got the second or the third longest life expectancy. We've got some of the best education. I think we rank in the top 5 when it comes to education. So we're always at the top in quality of life issues, but those numbers are going to start slipping as more and more people move out of Connecticut.
And can you tell me your overall opinion of Connecticut's Governor Dan Malloy?
I know Daniel and like him. I wish that he had started doing 7 years ago what he's doing right now, or maybe it was 6 years ago. It's taken him an awfully long time to figure out that you can't tax your way to prosperity, especially in a state like Connecticut that's been hit by one tax after another tax after another tax since 1991. You know, everybody thought in 1991 that bringing a state sales tax to Connecticut was the most responsible thing to do. I was down in Florida at the time and was saying at the time that there was a disaster, because what happens is they always say they're going to bring in a state sales tax for a certain purpose, and then it expands, and then and they also passed a constitutional amendment to have spending caps to make sure that they didn't keep increasing the state sales tax. Well, they did, and they keep cutting bad deals with state employees. They've got a pension system that's busted and broke. 40% of all tax dollars, all regulations, everything that goes to Connecticut goes to paying the government. We can't prosper if we keep living that way. So, I mean, I like Daniel Malloy, but his 2 tax increases have been pretty devastating. And let me say, it's not just him. Jody Rell left him with, if I'm not mistaken, a $2 billion deficit.
Yeah, and Connecticut has been changing. In the last election cycle, Daniel Malloy won by a slim margin. Do you think by getting a Republican in the governor's office would help Connecticut?
It depends on who the Republican is.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying necessarily me. I'm not saying necessarily me. But you know, we've had Republican governors in since 1991, and we have seen through the 1990s and over the past 10, 15 years, the Republicans in office making the same mistake that the Democrats have been making in office, spending too much money, cutting bad deals with public employee unions, making it so in the end it will be the public employee unions that get hurt because politicians make them promises that they can't keep. And so I think if there's a Republican that actually believes in spending less money on government and spending more on infrastructure, spending more on education, spending more on R&D research, and doing the sort of things, partnering with private entities to build a Silicon Valley East, which we could do in Connecticut, then I think there would be some hope. I think we also have the opportunity to bring manufacturing jobs back to Connecticut. But ironically, you've got to look at what a Democrat's doing in Rhode Island right now. Democratic governor who has fought against the entrenched interests up there. She's fighting very hard to do a lot of the things that Connecticut needs to do over the next several years.
And I want to now move into some questions about some politics going around the nation. The election has been very interesting for President in 2016. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me how the election affects the show on a daily basis?
I mean, Donald Trump is, as Mika would say, is like popping popcorn with the lid off. I mean, it's just chaos all the time, and we always have things to talk about. And I think right now we're looking at Donald Trump seeming to get out of control, in a way that's going to hurt him in the general election. Hillary Clinton, of course, is having trouble with her emails. We're talking about the possibility of the FBI continuing their investigation. So right now, I think we've had a chaotic 6 to 9 months. I think the chaos is going to continue right through the conventions and into the fall. And
Trump did go after Morning Joe on a tweet on Friday.
Yes, he did.
Do you think that's what's going to cost him the election?
Of course it will. You know, it's funny. He'll always, whenever we criticize him, he'll say something negative and say, "I'll never watch the show again." And then the next day he'll criticize us because of what's on the show. He watches the show every day. He said on Friday, "I'll never watch Morning Joe again." Today he was criticizing what somebody on our show said. So, no, it's Donald's Donald. I've known him for 10, 11 years. Yeah. He's a friend, but, I always told him I'm going to call it the way I see it.
And do you think if a third-party candidate went in there, somebody like Mitt Romney, that would help?
I think a third-party candidate could win this year. Yeah. I'm sort of in the minority, but I think anything's possible this year, and I do think a third-party candidate still has a chance to win. People say that it's too late, but you can still qualify for most ballots right now.
Yeah, and maybe Gary Johnson. If somebody could hold back them from 270, then it would send it to the House.
Sends it to the House, and then the House picks who's going to be the next president of the United States. So I don't think that's happened in a very long time, but it could happen.
And what do you think about Trump changing like the Republican platform, like the Republican basis?
Well, what Trump tapped into is something that's been around for a long time, and that is a growing populist sentiment inside the Republican Party. It's a party that has been controlled by special interests in Washington for too long, that hasn't focused enough on working class voters, people who were struggling to pay their bills every 2 weeks, people who were struggling to get their kids into college, people who are struggling to be able to pay their mortgage. And I don't think the Republican platform, I don't think the Republican Party's focused enough on those voters through the years, even though those voters are their base. That's why Donald Trump's populist message resonated the way it did. And the Republican Party, instead of just attacking him, and we've been very critical of him as well, but the Republican Party, if it wants to survive, needs to figure out how to get those people that voted for Donald Trump to vote for their candidates in the future.
And a lot of people are saying if a high Democratic turnout happened, then the Republicans can lose the Senate. Do you think the Republicans will keep the Senate?
I think it's too early to tell. I think if Trump continues to behave as erratically as he's behaved over the past several weeks, I think the House and the Senate are in play. I think Republicans are starting to get very, very worried about what they're seeing on Morning Joe every morning.
And there is a re-election for senator in Connecticut with Richard Blumenthal. Do you think Dan Carter's running against him as a state representative? Do you think he has any chance?
It's very hard for any Republican to win in Connecticut in a presidential year, especially in federal races. So you've got to place Blumenthal as a big favorite.
Yeah.
But you know what? Nobody thought I had a chance to win when I ran in 1994. Nobody. Even my parents. My father said he was voting for the other guy. That's how bad it was. I had friends coming up and telling me there were 6 people in the race. Said, "Joe, you're doing a great job. You may finish 4th or 5th. You should be proud of yourself." And I ended up winning. Anything's possible, but just I gotta, when people look at Connecticut in a presidential year, when voter turnout's a lot higher, I think it's really hard for a Republican to win.
And we're gonna finish with some personal questions.
Okay.
We see the show here, but do you watch MSMBC at home? Or what news do you watch and read?
Read the papers a good bit. Mainly, I get my news from my news feed on Twitter.
Yeah.
We'll read the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and of course all the local Connecticut papers. But I watch MSNBC a good bit. I love Halpern and Heilman's show, with all due respect. I'll watch Chuck Todd as well, and watch the election coverage some too.
And a lot of people are wondering, what's your daily life like? What time do you get up, and what time do you get over here?
Well, I've got 4 kids, so my daily life is taking care of my 4 kids. But I wake up at about 4:30, get in here about 5:30. The show goes from 6 to 9. I'll have meetings throughout most of the day, but I always try to get on the West Side Highway to get back up to Connecticut before 3:30, because that's usually when the traffic picks up. And then I can go up and I can, pick up my kids at school, come home, play with them some, and then while they're doing their homework, I prepare the show for the next day.
And we ask this question to everybody: what's your favorite pizza restaurant?
Favorite pizza restaurant? Right now, it's Pinocchio's in New Canaan.
Yeah. What about Sally's in New Haven? Do you like that?
That's a great one too.
And a lot of people don't know this, but you're in a band. Can you tell our viewers about that?
Yeah, I've been writing music and performing since I was 13, 14 years old, and have written 300 songs, wrote a musical when I was in college, and I just love music. Writing music is what I love doing the most, and we play actually once a week in the city here at a place called Prohibition, and I have a great time doing it. And have a blast. So sometimes I get Mika to come up on stage and talk a little bit to the crowd. My daughter Kate, who's 12 years old, got up on stage last week and sang a song by Duffy called Mercy. And just we have a great time.
And Joel, I'd like to thank you for coming on this show. If you're watching this on YouTube, remember, go to our website, ravingryan.com. Also, subscribe to us, comment below, and thanks for watching Raving Ryan.